So it's been about a month since I've been using Oppo's newest foldable, the Oppo Find N2. And I just gotta say this now, this is probably the cutest foldable that I've ever used, and it's actually starting to become my top pick for foldable in 2023. Now I know that the year just started, and I know that we have a few more months until we find out what's new with the new Z Fold and the Z Flips, but since getting this phone over the holidays, I actually got to take this with me to a ton of trips, and it's been a blast to use. Alright, so let's talk about specs on this little guy. The Oppo Find N2 in terms of its processor unfortunately did not make the cut to use the new Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, but we still have a very capable Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1 here from last year. Now this processor is still a very fast and a very capable processor that'll give you top tier performance, for at least a while. Now my review unit comes with 256 gigs of storage and 12 gigs of RAM, and it's packing a 4520 mAh battery that's capable of charging the phone up to 67 watts wired. And unfortunately no wireless charging, which is a bit odd for a premium phone. Besides that though, there's a triple camera on the back of the phone, which is color calibrated and uses Hasselblad's color science and Oppo's Marie Silicon X imaging processor to basically help you process, your photos and videos that you capture with this phone. And then there's two selfie cameras that are identical too, one on the cover display and another one on the inside. And of course, you have the 5.5-inch outer cover display that's wider and shorter than most foldable phones, and a 7.1-inch internal display that just looks really beautiful to look at. And just to dive deeper into the display tech on the Find N2, I really love how vibrant, sharp, and bright these displays are. Whether it's the outside screen or the internal screen, both get really bright, with the outside display getting up to 1350 nits of peak brightness and up to 1550 nits on the internal display. Now both the displays also feature 120Hz refresh rate, which is super smooth and makes the phone feel super fast, but the internal display features an AMOLED LTPO panel that can dial the refresh rate down to 1 Hz to basically save on battery life, whereas the cover display up front, you can't really do that. But if you're buying a foldable, you're most likely going to spend more, time using the inside display anyways. But still, Oppo did a really great job with both of these displays that, whether you're using the smaller front display, the cover display, or the bigger inner display, both will look, again, incredibly sharp, vibrant, and really bright. Now as for the hinge and the crease on the N2, Oppo's using an updated 2nd generation Flexion hinge, which basically, made the overall design thinner, and which means this can also shut completely flat, which I've only actually seen on the Xiaomi Mix Fold 2. But one advantage this hinge has over the Mix Fold 2 though is what they're calling Flex Form mode, which can, basically hold the phone at any angle between 45 to 125 degrees, kind of like what Samsung's been doing with their Flex mode. And as for the crease, it's way better than the Z Fold's inner display. The crease on the Z Fold 4 is so noticeable, and it just doesn't look all that great. But what the Fold has though is proper IP rating, which I can't say the same for Oppo's Find N2. There's no IP certification whatsoever. Now the crease isn't as deep as the one on the Samsung Z Fold 4. Here I can barely tell that there's even a crease when I'm swiping through the inner display. And yeah, it's pretty awesome. As for its performance, it's using the Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1. It has 12 gigs of RAM. Everything runs really well, from games to multitasking, browsing the web. I've had no issues with this phone whatsoever. There's no app crashes over the month that I've had the phone, and it just performs really well. Now, I haven't really noticed any overheating issues on my end, but then again, the weather where I'm at is very, very cold, so maybe around the summertime, in about 6 months time, we'll probably see this phone heat up quite a bit when gaming, but as of now, it's been perfect. And in terms of battery life, I've actually gotten pretty impressive battery life on this small phone. I was able to get about 6 to 6.5 hours of screen on time on average, which actually is really good for a flagship foldable. Plus, having that 67 watt charging is really nice, but unfortunately, wireless charging is out of the picture. Now, when it comes to software, ColorOS 13 in this foldable state, I think looks really, really good, and I don't think that it's something that a lot of people are going to hate. With basic fold-like features like split screen or floating windows, I think it's pretty solid, but there are some minor annoyances that I personally ran into. Since the phone is exclusive to China, it doesn't have, the Google Play Store or Google Play services pre-installed, but I was able to download it online and I was able to install it without any issues. Once that was installed, everything that I use on a daily basis worked as expected. Now, if you are an Android Auto user, just know that this doesn't support Android Auto from a ROM perspective. So shout out to Joshua Vergara for confirming that for me. But besides that though, the rest of ColorOS feels very much like a vanilla Android experience, which isn't a bad thing because I really love how the Pixel looks and feels. And ColorOS 13 kind of reminds me of that. There's really not a whole lot of extra software features, that they're really pushing for you to use. Split screen works really well for, apps that have vertical spaces, and I can resize them. Although I can't quite use YouTube or video apps like Netflix to work in that horizontal split screen space yet, even though there's an option that shows up, but it's grayed out. And also some apps don't really support split screen natively. So Instagram, for example, doesn't support it. So I actually had to go into the settings and enable developers options and turn on the force apps to work in split screen. And after that, I was able to use Instagram along with other apps in split screen mode. It's a little buggy here and there, and it's a little annoying that I had to enable that in the developer options, but for now, it's fine. Also, I did notice that some apps will push your phone to rotate your phone sideways because it thinks that the phone's not wide enough to display everything. It's a little weird using the phone sideways because it's nearly the same size when you rotate it, and I'm not sure if this is something that Oppo can fix in the future or, if it's an app developer issue. But yeah, some apps will force you to rotate your phone, or if you want, just fold it shut and use the cover screen instead. Alright, so when it comes to cameras, foldables don't usually get the best of the best camera hardware, but what Oppo has on the Find N2 is actually almost identical to what you'd see from their flagship phone, the Find X5 Pro. You're getting a triple camera setup with an ultra wide, a main wide camera, and a 2x telephoto camera. And the camera system is co-engineered with Hasselblad, giving you the classic X-Pan shooting mode for that ultra wide panoramic cinematic shot, and the meticulously selected Hasselblad filters, which are basically artsy filters that can give your photos this cinematic, artsy vibe. But in typical Oppo fashion, you can also enable beauty filters, which I actually turned off immediately. But yeah, when it comes to its photo quality, the Find N2 is gonna surprise a lot of people. Now, one thing I will say before we talk about its photo quality is that when you're trying to take photos and you're actually, using the phone and you're framing your shot, you're probably going to notice how bad and how low quality the preview looks compared to the final images once you tap the shutter button and let the image process for a couple of seconds. I'm not really sure why the preview on the camera app looks terrible, but once I figured out that it wasn't going to look that bad, I went out and snapped a ton of photos, which you're all seeing now. Now, the photos, whether it was on a bright and sunny day, to indoors with mixed lighting, or even in dimly lit conditions in a restaurant, looks awesome. I was able to take this phone with me to CES and snap a ton of photos for this review, and none of these photos are edited. They're taken right off of the phone, and in my opinion, the Oppo Find N2 takes the best photo on any foldable. And yes, in my opinion, it takes way better photos than the Xiaomi Mix Fold 2, which I thought had the best camera on a foldable until I used this phone. Also, the fact that the Find N2 features flex form mode, which means you can set the phone down and put the phone on an angle, hold out your hand and take the photos for you, is a really neat trick. Something we've definitely seen from Samsung's Flip and Fold line. Now, when it comes to video, I think they look good, but not great. Even with the help of that Marie Silicon X image processor, I just don't love the videos that I've shot with a lot of Android phones. I still think iPhones do videos better, but the videos you can get out of this foldable isn't bad, especially if you have really good lighting. And yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. I really wish that Oppo sold this phone to other markets because I think this would be a hit. I love the small form factor, and everyone that I showed this phone to loved it as well. It's like you're using a normal phone with the cover screen, and then once you open it up, it's like an iPad mini. Now, I'm sure there are ways to import this to the US, and I actually have been using this with Mint or T-Mobile and was able to get a mixture of LTE and sometimes 5G, but have only called people using Telegram or WhatsApp, and all of that worked great. So if you are in the US and you really want a foldable for 2023, you can probably wait to see what Samsung does later this year with their Z Fold 5, or find a way to import this and go from there. It's a really solid phone, and it's a really fun phone to use, and I think you'll enjoy it too.